Hello, today I want to show you how to switch from a multi-board, which is this board here. That's the multi-board from the Tronxy, from GearBest, or from the Anet A8 to an RAMPS board. I had to switch to the RAMPS board because the Mega broke somehow during printing. First thing you have to do is to create a connection from your power supply to the connector of your RAMPS board. There you can see the black wires are the ground wires and the red wires are the 12 volts. Be really careful about these connectors because you can damage your RAMPS board if they are connected the wrong way around. It's also recommended to use two cables from your power supply if you aren't using an external MOSFET like this one, which I use. So always use two cables. The first ones are for the main melty components, the extruder and so on, and the second one is just for the heat bed. What you have to do first is to put the RAMPS board onto your Arduino. I got a really cheap kit from Amazon and the connectors were bent quite badly, so it was quite hard getting it together. So you have to bend these black connectors a little bit so they fit. The next thing you want to do is to place these jumpers, which are here, just under your connectors for the stepper driver. You need all three of them to have the finest stepper drivers, to have the finest steps. So it's 1/16 for the A4988, I think. Yeah. After you have placed all of these jumpers, you can then connect your stepper drivers. These are the stepper drivers over there. And there it is important to mount the aluminum heatsink because the temperatures of the chip would get too hot. Also keep in mind that the heat spreader shouldn't touch anything at all from these pins because, well, aluminum is conductive and you would short out some pins. What's important about placing these is a lot of times it's just said that you look at the potentiometer and place them in your RAMPS board. I wouldn't do this that way. I would just look at the bottom of that. You see there direction, step, sleep, and so on. And then you have a look on your RAMPS board where these match. And then you place your stepper drivers. So in this case, you can see there's ground, and there's also ground, there's direction, step, and so on. So the stepper drivers go in that way. So the potentiometer shows away from your power input. This is the case for these A4988 stepper drivers. However, for the DRV types, DRV8825, it's just the other way around. That's why it's not recommended to just look at the potentiometer over there. So then connect all of the other stepper drivers in there. Usually you wouldn't even need this stepper driver over there because it's for the second extruder and you don't have a second extruder. So, but I will still insert one there Just press it down all the way. What I also noticed with this cheap kit from Amazon is that, like you can see, I think, over there, is that the stepper drivers have different length, so they don't fit that well, I have to say. So this one will not fit there. I think this one will also not fit there. If you want to remove a stepper driver, I recommend you to use a flathead and just twist it in to the slot on the other side as well, and then you can pull it out quite easily without bending these pins. So I've connected all these stepper drivers over there, and now you have to connect your motors. There, the important part is that the original one used JSP connectors, which are these type of connectors, and they don't really fit on the RAMPS board. For the X and Y axis they will fit, just like that, without a problem. But for the Z axis they won't fit, because they are two connectors together and the JSP connectors are just too thick to fit. The same for the limit switches over there. They will fit, but they will bend the other two limit switches pins, which are for the max limit switch, which you mostly don't need, but I would also recommend there using DuPont connectors. The same thing is for the thermistors over there. These won't fit at all with these JSP connectors, so you will have to replace them. One thing you can do is either you buy a crimping tool and crimp these connections yourself, or you just buy a kit like these with already crimped cables, connectors, and then you just cut the cables and solder them together, which I've already done. There you can see it's the normal DuPont connector over there, and I've soldered them all together. You will have to do this to all of these stepper driver motors, as well as for the limit switches over there. And where are they? There is a thermistor. Quite a mess, these cables. And for the thermistors, just over there. Also, what you have to do is you have to cut the wire for this fan here. Mine just broke. I've already ordered a new one. And yeah, you have to hardwire it to 12 volts. Just a short correction here. The easiest way to wire up the extruder cooling fan is to use these two pins here. Just behind the polyfuses, these yellow things here. And well, just use standard DuPont connectors for your extruder cooling fan and plug it into there. It's way easier than using a new set of wires or to wire it up to the power input or anything else. Also, you can just unplug it if you want the cooling fan to stop for example, if you are idling and not really heating up the hot end. I would also definitely recommend this upgrade, an external MOSFET with these type of connectors. Just normal, like you would use in automotives or somewhere else. Yeah, it's just way safe. It's just safer that way because the connectors, this one and this one, aren't rated for the high current, and they have to provide for the heat bed. So really consider this upgrade. I will put a link in the description below. So now again to wiring up the RAMPS board. It's quite easy. You have there your X stepper driver input, your Y stepper driver input, and there are both your Z stepper driver inputs. Over there is your extruder input, and these are your limit switches. To the stepper driver inputs, it doesn't really matter how you connect them, because you can either change the direction of the motors in software, or you can just rotate the plug around. So instead of plugging it in this way, where the black cable shows away from the power input, you can rotate it so it shows in this direction. Then you will also change the direction the axis moves, so you can't really make any mistake there. I would recommend connecting all these in the same direction. Then you home your axis and look at which direction they go. You can then either change the direction in your software, in the firmware of Marlin, or you just rotate the connectors around. It just doesn't really matter. For the limit switches, it's really important how to connect them, because you can easily destroy your RAMPS board that way. You can see there that you have a positive and a negative terminal there. So you aren't allowed to connect these together. So don't connect your end stops that way that these connect to the bottom two pins. Like this. You will destroy definitely your RAMPS board. Connect these to the S port and to the minus port. Just like this. The direction just doesn't really matter. It's fine however you connect it. Then to the connection of the hot end and the heat bed, I would recommend you to use these ends like these to crimp them on, as well as for the power input to crimp them on. These are the same which I used there. They are just crimping tools, which are these ones, to crimp on the end of your cable leads so your leads don't get destroyed or whatever. So I've connected all the connectors of the steppers together, all the same direction, as well as my end stops, X, Y, and Z end stop. For the Z end stop I use inductive sensor. That's why there's only one wire there. It's this sensor here, which you can see. And I had to wire it directly to 12 volts, which I also connected to the external MOSFET over there. And I just used a diode in reverse, more or less. So the strip of the diode shows in the direction of your sensor. And this wire, the black wire with the diode, is then connected to your end stop. After you have done this, you will need to connect your heat bed. That's the first connector over there. Then your cooling fan for your parts. That's the D9. And then D10 is your hot end. Yeah, that's all. For the fan, you have to look after the right hookup. So minus to minus, plus to plus. Otherwise, it will spin the wrong way around. For the hot end, doesn't really matter. As well as for the MOSFET, it doesn't really matter. I only use these small wires for the MOSFET, well, because I have the external MOSFET here. So it doesn't have to provide any current, that much current. It only has to provide as much current to draw the MOSFET. So you can use their quite small cables. If you're using a heat bed, use thick cables. I probably would recommend to replace the original cables from the printer, because they are quite thin, to be honest. So the heat bed, the cooling fan, and the hot end are connected to the RAMPS board. So there the thermistors are connected. So first for the hot end and then for the heat bed over there. Now everything is connected but the screen. As for the screen, in my kit I got a 1268.4 display with this smart controller, or however it's called. Smart adapter it's called. You can also use your old LCD screen if you want to, but I will everything connect to the full graphics LCD. So for that you have to use this smart adapter and place it on your RAMPS board. It's just at the back of your RAMPS board. You connect the long strip to the long pins, and also look that you connect these. Then there is labeled EXP, EXP1 and 2. So you have to look at the back of your LCD screen. There it says the same thing. So the 1 goes to the 1 and the second goes to the second. So now everything is connected. The LCD screen is connected and the RAMPS board is mounted to the frame, just so it doesn't touch any metal object and shorten out something. I would recommend you to do that. Also check that there aren't open wires touching or anything like that. Keep away cables from these connectors, because they will provide electricity. Just look around. Look that you don't have connected accidentally the cables at the bottom of these connectors. So these pins should be free. Otherwise you will break your multi board. When you've checked everything, you can turn on your printer, which I will do. And you can see everything is running. I've already loaded a firmware on my printer, which works. The one bad thing about this kit I got from Amazon, you can see there, the contrast is quite bad. In reality it's a little bit better, but still not good at all. And if I turn the potentiometer up a little bit, it gets even worse. So you can't see anything at all anymore. So it's to the lowest setting. So a short update regarding the RAMPS board. I fixed the issue with the contrast on the display. There are two ways you can do this. Either you can desolder all of these pins or the pins on the backside, and then below is a second potentiometer which you can calibrate, or you can also do is to just solder in a small resistor between these two pins, and the resistor depends on the contrast settings the first potentiometer is set on. So just begin with the highest resistor you have, and then just gradually lower the resistor you have until you like the contrast of your display. It's just way easier than just desoldering all of these pins and then readjusting the potentiometer below. What you have to do now is to connect your printer, go into Arduino and install a firmware. I will make a video about this later, and I will explain everything. So that's it. I hope you enjoy it. See you next time.